Well, that is Officer Dora Fontaine, and she was crucial because she submitted a report that basically said that, you know, this wasn't a good shoot. And then she gave an interview to March, and his report said she said this was a good shoot. And she was very, 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 very upset about it. So Marni Jo Snyder, okay, she was so upset about it, and she was such a good witness, I think, that when Mr. McKay, who represents Detective March, got on, he said, well, she couldn't get a job at Popeyes. She has 90,000 reasons to lie, you know. I thought it was very demeaning. Did you happen to see it? And if you did, what do you think about cross-examining that way to a police officer in front of a judge in that demeaning tone, especially when you have women, one female judge and a female police officer?
Right. I don't see that as a viable strategy unless he had something that he could point to in her past that indicated that the insults that he was throwing at her related to her actual job performance. Meaning, like, has she messed up paperwork in the past? Is she incompetent in her job as a police officer? Where someone worked before, what their educational level is, doesn't make them a good cop or a bad cop or a diligent police officer or not. And that's really the issue here for her testimony.
Yeah, and perhaps after or before McKay cross-examined her like that, he should have looked up the fact that maybe the judge is a fan of Popeyes, and the late Anthony Bourdain, every time he had to stop at a city that had Popeyes, he had to go there first. So it may not have been the insult he intended it to be, but it certainly was an insult. We have to go to break. We're going to listen to some of the closings when we come back, so stay tuned. That's Prosecutor Holmes, a special prosecutor. You know, I'm a defense attorney, but boy, I really like her style. I like the prosecution in this case. I don't know if the cops will get convicted, but I really like the way the prosecutor presented it. And Brian, one of the things I had, she talks later on, she says Walsh actually, who was only riding with Van Dyke the first time, rode with him to the scene. He got out of his car. He stayed behind the car. He didn't, you know, he had his gun out, but he wasn't really, he started like going around the car as if there was no advancement by Laquan McDonald towards them because he wasn't afraid of them. And indeed, when Van Dyke shot, you could see on the tape, but he like shuddered, you know, he shuddered. Is that good to show that he's lying?
I think it's good to show because you can juxtapose his words as to what he saw and perceived it occurred, and then his actual actions, just as you described them, the way in which he moves, his shock to the shooting, and kind of show like this doesn't match up. And the reason why it doesn't match up is, to your theory, they're trying to cover it up. Yeah, and you use the word shock. And Marni Jo Snyder, shock. The police officers don't have to give a statement for at least 48 hours. It's pretty much that way in all jurisdictions, some maybe even 72 hours, because their mind is too bruised to really tell the truth as to what happened. They really can't get over the shock. Now, you and I, as a civilian, we have to give a statement right away. Why do police officers give that opportunity?
I don't actually agree that they should, but they get that because their perceptions are supposed to be clear. That just what the prosecution said is that they make those cases, so they have to be truthful. They have to be held to that good standard. So they want them to have a clear head when they give their statements. The thing that we have here that doesn't work with the whole shock thing is that they said that Jason Van Dyke was so shocked that maybe he perceived things incorrectly. So what, every single police officer at the scene was in such shock that they all don't know what they're talking about, but they all have the same version of the shocked,
right.
You
really break this down simply, but we now have to go to a break or else my seat is going to get shocked because I haven't gone there yet. Stay tuned. We'll be right back, and we're going to go to the defense closing argument, and then after that, and then you have to stay tuned. The reason why I'm teasing this is because Kachinsky is coming up too, also. Defense closing and Kachinsky. Well, obviously, that was not a break. That was the flamboyant defense attorney, McKay, who really only knows one speed, but he's really good. Marni Jo Snyder, if you are being represented by Mr. McKay, do you like his style or not like his style?
I don't know. I didn't like it. I don't think attacking the victim of another officer who was already convicted of murdering that victim is a really good way to go here. I think, especially at a bench trial, I think that he needs to concentrate on what happened with the reports. And I thought from the last witness, his defense was, March didn't look at these.
Well, obviously defenses can change, can't they, Brian Buckmeyer? Right.
I would agree with Marni. Like, I have no idea what he's doing here, and maybe it did change. Maybe there's
yeah, but he's got to think about this. He has got to have his officer, who's not there anymore, but he's got to go in some community, accept it back in the community if he's acquitted. So doesn't he want to make the same kind of case and show that he believes in his client?
I think it's tantamount to always show that you believe the client, and if you can, believe your client. But I would agree with Marni and with Snyder. Relitigating a case where someone already lost to say that it's Laquan's fault for this, that's an uphill battle that I'm not sure it's worth taking.
Yeah, I'm not sure you should be attacking the victim. In fact, one of the things that they could easily say is, look, this is what was related to me, and this is what I found. I have no reason to believe them. I don't have independent forensic investigators. I have what my officers tell me, and they perceive something, and I saw him moving a little bit. That may have been the better defense. I don't know. It depends on what this judge does, who's known as a police judge, by the way. She is an appointed judge by the other judges. She is not elected in Chicago, this one. But, those questions can't be answered. But what can be answered is break, and Len Kachinsky after this break. Well, that is the prosecution's opening statement. It's kind of a roadmap telling us that there were 2 restraining orders, that Kachinsky was told to keep things professional, not personal, with his law clerk, Mandy Bartelt. And Marni Jo Snyder, you were a law clerk to a judge, as was I, okay? What are the rules between stalking and between harassment, workplace harassment? Are they different?
Well, they're different because under the statute that they have in Wisconsin, you can stalk someone whether you're their peer, their boss, whether you're in a position of less power or more power than them. In this case, Leonard Kachinsky was in charge or supervising her, or at least in a higher position, and used that higher position to constantly make her feel uncomfortable. Okay. And I don't know that anyone debates that.
I know, but no matter what, the ability to make a law clerk feel uncomfortable over a period of time, we don't want to go to work and have that happen to any of us, do we? The question is whether or not this is going to be criminal under the stalking statute, I would imagine.
Correct, absolutely. They have to prove that course of conduct and emotional distress.
By her. She has to suffer emotional distress, and she has to be a reasonable person, right? She can't be an eggshell victim or somebody who's just tender, correct?
Correct, but they can argue that the dynamic of law clerk to judge is part of why she suffered emotional distress.
Yeah, you saw that she's crying there, right? You saw that she's crying. So I would imagine that her testimony now becomes very important as to whether or not she suffered emotional distress and what type of emotional distress she suffered, right?
Absolutely.
And without that, even though the conduct may be workplace harassment, it wouldn't be stalking under the statute beyond a reasonable doubt.
Correct, right. They have to prove emotional distress.
Okay.
And they have to prove that she's suffering from it.
All right. So one of the ways we're going to see whether this qualifies is listening to the victim here, who the judge says is just an alleged victim, not a real victim. Let's hear Mandy Bartelt. So Marni Jo Snyder, this is Mandy Bartelt telling us the beginning and how this is progressing, that she's feeling uncomfortable and she's trying to actually help her boss. She knows he's sick with cancer. Does a victim, when they try to be nice and try to kind of shuffle it off, a sort of harassment, a workplace harassment, are they in a worse position than for stalking because they're trying to ignore it and just go on with their job?
Right. I mean, I think that's true. And I think in some ways, what needs to happen is either the prosecution in their closing or eventually the witness needs to put it all together and say, this whole time she's disturbed. So just because he can't testify that she told him she was disturbed during that doesn't mean that she wasn't feeling it that whole way through. And she's really going to have to explain slowly. She has to slow down. After this, I felt this way. After this, I felt this way. And finally, I hit my breaking point. And that's when I told someone for the first time. Right.
And in fact, the fact that she is his employee and she is under him in terms of the depth chart at a command, that puts her at a disadvantage no matter what, doesn't it?
Right, it does. I mean, during that time, for her to speak out that first time and say, you are harassing me, you are bothering me, and you're causing me emotional distress, I want you to stop. I mean, the prosecution has to explain to the jury that that's why that was inside of her so long.
Right.
She used to talk about sleepless nights when she wasn't sure if she would have a job if she said something. That's where they need to go.
All right, so we're going to see whether or not they go there when we come back from this break. Stay tuned with us. This is the stalking trial of Len Kachinsky. So that's the prosecutor continuing to tell us what she intends to prove through her witness and the victim, Mandy, or alleged victim, Mandy Bartelt. Marni Jo Snyder, you have both represented people, you have prosecuted people. Here it seems to me from listening to her, she only needs to prove one act that a reasonable person felt was bad and that caused her emotional distress, and that Len Kachinsky really should have known that what he was doing was wrong. Correct?
Yeah, well, I haven't been a prosecutor, but
yeah, I'm sorry. I assume everybody in the world was a prosecutor. You know, when you're a defense attorney, you kind of assume that.
It does feel like that sometimes. No, well, she has to prove that at least one of those actions he knew or should have known. And so that gives them a lot of space for her to have suffered emotional distress over that long period of time. But they only have to show that one time it was communicated to him that she was feeling that emotional distress and he should have stopped.
And it would seem to me, wouldn't it be better if there was the restraining order, which there were two, and he continued, did the actions after the restraining orders, did they become more significant or less significant?
I think they do under the law, and I think they will for a jury. He is now told by an official, right, just either on the same level as him or higher, that you cannot go near this person. Now it's not another court administrator that's saying it, it's another judge. Do not go near this person.
Okay.
And you can't stop.
And so let's listen to what Mandy Bartelt tells a jury, because remember, this is a jury trial. It is a criminal trial, as to the act or acts which continued to make her feel even more uncomfortable than she told us before. That was Mandy Bartelt, the court clerk and alleged victim of Len Kachinsky, the making of murderer, famed lawyer who didn't represent Brian Dassey too well. Mandy's tell us about her stalking, what she perceived as stalking by crime. Now, Marni Jo Snyder, I am listening to that, and I am getting furious that the police who are called in to mediate the sessions between them, telling her there has to be rapport, because she's his court clerk. Well, there doesn't have to be rapport. There doesn't have to be this kind of rapport. I just think of like the scene from the old movie The Godfather with a horse head on the bed. I know where your mother lives. I know where your sister lives. I know where your brother lives. What say you? Is this stalking, or is this that she has to have rapport?
Well, no, I think that I don't know whether it's going to meet all the prongs, because we haven't heard all the evidence yet, but I absolutely think that this was designed, that the things that he was saying were designed to cause emotional distress, that was intentional. I think the police that were brought in that day, she said they were kind of brought in as like HR people in the interim.
Right.
I think that was strange. I understand why they didn't arrest him on site, because there is that technicality of it being public information, and they're giving a judge the benefit of the doubt, but come on, at this jury trial, with that testimony and that fact, everything else I think could fall into place.
And the fact that she's crying, recounting this, to me shows the emotional distress that she suffered and that the prosecution just proved.
Right. Well, I mean, look, it's all about the jury having to look at the victim to evaluate their credibility. And these were not false tears. This was a face stained with tears, very upset. And at the right times, she was explaining these threats that she had to endure in front of police officers. I like how she explained, well, the police officers were acting like it's no big deal, but that is not what I think.
Right.
And she almost could have looked at the jury and said, and I think you know I'm right.
Right. And I agree with you. But right now we're going to cover more of the Len Kachinsky trial, but we have to take a quick, short break. Stay with us. So that's the defense attorney for Len Kachinsky in the stalking trial, that they're friends, that indeed, he posts on her Facebook page, but more that indeed he's also sick, remember he had cancer, he's in the hospital, she's nice. Marni Jo Snyder, could there have been a formal defense here that his brain was affected by the cancer, and that's why he can't perceive that what he's doing is wrong, because once she friended him and was nice to him, he's taking all the sympathy he can get because he's so sick?
Right. Well, I mean, yes and no, right? So they certainly can use that for sympathy. The problem is that what kind of damage has been done to his brain that he doesn't understand a restraining order?
Okay,
What
well,
kind
that's
of
a good
damage
point.
has been
Yeah,
done? Right.
as the defense attorney, I hadn't quite thought about that. Yeah.
Oh no! I mean, look, we don't know where this is going to go. So I don't know whether there's a medical issue with that, or I don't know whether there were mixed signals sent right before that. I don't know what they're going to argue. But right now they're doing that mix of blaming the victim and then showing that they're friends. But
well, they want to show. I think they're kind of also mixing. Don't you think up sexual harassment here or workplace harassment, that this was not unwelcome, and yet you have the restraining order.
Right. Well, they're trying to say that maybe that this is a close-knit office place, and so the norms there were a little different anyway. But once you get a restraining order against someone, norms, no norms, fruit baskets or not, you cannot have contact with that person.
But doesn't the defense argue that she's Facebook friends and she responds to something he says, and therefore all bets are off? Then, she's kind of forgiven him and they're just kind of like normal Facebook friends?
Right. Well, that's where they have to go. But they're going to have to take every single little action that he did and explain that away, and that's a lot of different actions.
Well, one of the things I'm thinking about is that the defense attorney said that Len is a little bit quirky. So, there was this old thing, the Addams family. I know you've seen them on TV and movies. They're creepy and they're kooky. You remember that? I'm kind of getting a little creepy and the kooky here going on. But does the creepy and the kooky, could that also be the criminal?
Right. I mean, you're pretty much saying, yes, my client's fairly creepy, and yes, he's, doing this to this woman. The problem is that he's an elected judge, and so that's the kind of person that someone doesn't want a creeper to be.
And that's what I think we're going to hear from next with Mandy Bartelt, who's going to continue to tell about this workplace harassment. Let's see. So this is Mandy Bartelt. She goes back and tells us about the early part of the relationship with Kachinsky. And I don't mean relationship in a bad way. I mean working, friendship, whatever, with Kachinsky, that he was sick and that, he had known her mother a little bit and that type of thing. Now, Marni Jo Snyder, when I'm listening to this, if you have a prior existing friendship with somebody, could Len Kachinsky, and let's eliminate the restraining orders because he's not on trial here for the restraining order, perceive that indeed this was all part of the friendship, they're being nice to him, and he so desperately wanted a friend, and he thought that she and her family were really friends?
Yes, and that will go only so far. I think restraining order or not, when she says, we are not friends anymore, or stop contacting me, that's it. And that is really, what she's going to have to show is that she didn't give mixed signals. At some point, even if it was into their friendship, she said, we're not doing this anymore. And that I deserve to decide who my friends are and who they're not, and I can't do this.
Okay.
I think that's it. They have to show that she was clear.
All right. It's a very interesting case, even though, I love to hate Len Kachinsky because of his Brendan Dassey situation, but we're not going to solve that here today. We have to go to break first. To come back with more of this trial after that. That's Mandy Bartelt, the alleged victim. This is really creepy, Marni Jo Snyder. At least I'm kind of creeped out, and I'm sitting all the way here in New York City. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to get photographs to look at of her. It's very strange. And the fact that he can't keep one meeting professional all the way through. I mean, friends
she asked him to keep him professional, or she's going to seek assistance, right? She's telling him. She's giving him notice, as we say in the law.
Absolutely, and she's actually telling him ahead of time that heads up about HR. I will have to call HR if this continues. Friends don't call HR on friends. That's not a friendship thing. It's very clear that she does not want to have anything to do with him. It's
a clue that she's feeling emotionally abused. It's an absolute clue, in my opinion. How about you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, she's very clear here, and I don't hear any mixed signals. I don't hear any reply emails surprising the prosecution.
And she's going to continue to tell us the story that's even going to get worse. Let's listen. So this is Mandy Bartelt telling us about meow. Marni Jo Snyder, I'm here tapping my... If my boss came to me, started meowing with cat noises, saying I'm going to observe what you're going to do, after everything that's happened, I would definitely be in this courtroom. How about you?
She starts a sentence, and I start to say to myself, well, that's not bad. Maybe she is overreacting. She finishes the sentence with something utterly bizarre, like cat noises. I mean, she's not upset about him just tapping his pen. He's like breathing down her neck and meowing at her when his excuse for being near her is to do something work-related. So it's inappropriate.
I don't understand. I don't understand why no one took human resources action again. I just don't. I'm sitting here saying, how did it get to the point that we're in the criminal courts? I mean, this is ridiculous.
Right, and I think that's why I think that the prosecution should say the sentence you just said, is that this is how it got to the criminal court. No one took action on behalf of this woman. This is not just workplace harassment, and so we did decide to deal with it. It does meet the statute. You have to find him guilty. I think that's exactly what they say.
Yeah, because it's just, I can't even fathom somebody sitting, breathing down my neck, basically, looking at my computer, making I just can't fathom. What training in the handbooks was that in any judge's training?
Right. Even the statement, I'm going to sit behind you and observe you, despite having HR say, please stay away from her more frequently. That's even absurd to me.
Well, I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to get worse. And we're going to have another clip of her right next talking about it, and then we'll come back and talk on the other side, Marni. Let's listen. Len Kachinsky, we knew you when you were just a terrible attorney for Brendan Dassey. But this is Mandy Bartelt. She's your court clerk, and you're sending her emails telling her she's an A and somebody else was a B. Marni Jo Snyder, I've got creeps up my... I mean, yes, it is creepy. The question is it illegal?
I believe that they were saying June 16th. I believe this is after restraining order. I'm not sure. But it is certainly after she's made herself very clear. In fact, if I was the prosecution, I would point to the fact that he's trying to justify treating her and trying to be close to her in this email. I mean, this is the emails like, sorry, I'm stalking you, but I'm doing it because. And then it's the highlight reel of all the creepy things he does and how he feels about her.
Well, he's trying to make, if you just had this email in and of itself, it talks about work and all, you know, it can get a little off at one section. But if you had it yourself, that wouldn't be too bad, would it?
Right. I mean, then it might play into like the workplace harassment thing. It's a little inappropriate to talk to someone about comparing coworkers and stuff like that rather than just praising them for their performance. But certainly wouldn't be stalking. This is so ill-timed, this email, and it is so strange in content.
And so ill-advised, I would imagine. Yeah. Oh, there he is. There he is. This is what defendants go through. This is, I guess, when they took him in to arrest him on the stalking charge here, as we're watching on TV. So even lawyers can be charged.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that he's in there and I didn't see him with his own attorney is super strange.
Yeah, and you know, when you look at this case, he's a lawyer and a judge. He really has a higher standard, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I kidded about the Addams family. They're creepy and they're kooky and mysterious and spooky, you know, we know that. And that's part of it. But he has a standard to know what the law is, what the law is not, what he can do, what he can't do. You know, here at Law&Crime, we tried to focus on these cases, not only because this is kind of a high-profile case, because he was kind of high profile, but he is a lawyer and he is responsible and he does lead the bar in terms of how you treat your workplace. Now, you know, right now my assistant Pat Holbert is probably listening home saying, okay, this is all going to come back on you, Kenney Baden, you know, but you really have to, you know what you're doing and do it well. But here at Law&Crime, we're going to be continuing to cover this trial on Monday. Stay tuned on Monday. Stay tuned next for Aaron. I'm Kenney Baden. See you next week.